Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for Andor episode 11. So this is the second last episode of the season. We have one more left, the finale, next week. And I think this episode did a pretty good job at setting up that last episode. It seems like we're definitely building towards most of the cast seemingly coming back to Ferrix, finding out about the kind of reveal from the start of this episode, the death of Marva, so Andor's mother, and there being a funeral that is going to happen. And so Andor finds out about it. Deidre is the one organizing it, basically. Cyril ends up finding out about it and seems to be making his way there as well. And then we obviously have a bunch of characters still on Ferrix, so something is going to happen there. Obviously the Empire has come in, sort of clamped down quite heavily, so it seems like we're probably going to see some sort of a, I guess, like birth of the rebellion style thing happen here. With the death of Marva, interesting decision to apparently have her death happen off screen. Obviously there is setup to the fact that I don't think they're lying about the fact that she was dying, close to dying, but the fact that they just off screen didn't show it or anything like that makes it makes me feel like there's something more being kind of planned here. Now, are they going to do a full-on shock surprise reveal? She is actually sort of still alive. I still feel if she is alive, it's building up to her dying in some way. So we're going to get there, I think, in the end. There are some ideas that you can have for like how can they kind of reverse this, because they've obviously said the idea is, the custom is their ashes get mixed in with mortar to make bricks and they basically become Ferrix as part of like the buildings and so on. So it'd be interesting because she was talking about like wanting to check like underground passages or something like that before. Like, what if they have like explosives mixed in with her ashes or something like that, and they use that to sort of blow open something that relates to the Empire, and that's a big sign of like open rebellion on Ferrix and so on, because they're going to have to, I guess, like they're looking to lure Andor in. That's what the Empire is trying to do. So there has to be something that I think happens here to, in a way, allow Andor to escape and cause a lot of chaos. And that's where like the whole Cyril thing is going to actually, I think, be somewhat interesting, because he feels like this like third faction in this ultimately. He wants to be allied with the Empire, but they sort of haven't let him do that, so he is acting on his own. Now, it doesn't seem like there's immediately any reason for him to support Andor, unless it's some sort of a weird situation where he feels like if he is the one to sort of like bring Andor in, he'll maybe prevent the Empire from getting Andor so that he can do that to, I don't know, impress Deidre, take revenge for what happened before. There is a bit of an obsession with what's happened here, and back in the first episode, Andor killing the two guards, his colleagues and stuff like that. So it was interesting that Cyril was actually alerted to the fact that Andor's mother is dead by his like sergeant, the other main kind of guy from the first episode. So that will be interesting to see where they go, because otherwise his arc feels a little bit kind of all over the place. It's not exactly clear what they're trying to do with him. They got him this job, but it's clear that he's laser focused on this other thing. But then Deidre was not willing to let him be like a proper just informant, like directly working for her. What's going to happen here? That's a big thing. The other point, I suppose, that's going to maybe happen in the middle of all of this is like, where's Luthen going from here? Because it seems like the potential for his identity to be revealed and found out is borderline like on the verge of happening. This episode seemed to tease the idea with the big scene that the Empire is kind of beginning to think that Anto Krieger is actually like Axis, basically, and they kind of want her to confirm that. But she doesn't give an answer, and it's kind of unclear about like if they take that to be like, oh, she's not saying anything because it's true, and they just assume something, or it's a reveal what way she actually says that's about to happen, because it seems like pretty much everyone has ultimately settled on the idea that there's nothing they can do to save Anto Krieger and his 30 men. So the Empire are going to, take that cell out, but it will protect the rest of the rebel cells. Because interestingly, we had that scene with Luthen going to see Saw again, and Saw actually being like, I want in on that. But Luthen being like, no, you don't want part of that. They've been found out. And you begin to see sort of that kind of paranoia from Saw come out. And it seems like in a way, this is kind of partially where maybe some of it comes from. He begins to suspect, what if you're ISB? And there's a lot of confusion about who has informants, where did the information come from. But the kind of result of it seems to be that, okay, Saw's not going to do anything. Luthen leaves, and we're put in this situation where he's had to sacrifice Anto Krieger and his cell to protect the rest of the rebellion. And that obviously leads to Luthen on his way back has the conversation with his sort of like second in command, but then there's an Imperial like communication ship behind them, which explains why they were talking in kind of code the whole time. But also it leads to, they just decide like, okay, this works out, but we need the practice anyway. So they're not suspicious of him like inherently because they believe it's Axis or anything like that. They're just like, well, we're the Empire. Well, we can choose to do this if we want. We'll just do this one as practice. And so he's forced into a situation where like, I am not getting, tractor beamed aboard this ship, and there's no way out if I get caught. So we get to see the Fondor in action here, and the scope of its sort of gadgetry, that it's not just this ship with a couple of secret panels and stuff like that, like we've seen before. It does have a lot of other stuff going on. Of course, the kind of built-in sort of like droid, kind of like AI controller. Otherwise, it's just him doing everything. And it's cool to see like the thruster control that he seems to have, and then the really clever action scene with the tractor beam, as he sort of feigns that like, oh, I'm having thruster problems, they're kind of flaring up, so it looks like he's potentially trying to escape. They increase the tractor beam strength to basically max power, and he uses this opportunity to basically just release some debris, what flak cannon, whatever way you want to call it. Like it's like a debris kind of launcher thing, and so the tractor beam sucks in all the debris into the actual tractor cannon itself and destroys it. And so Luthen just suddenly leaps into action. All the accessories on the ship get used here as he just takes out a bunch of TIE fighters and heads off, leaving the commander of the kind of Star Destroyer there kind of just absolutely stunned at what has just happened. So it does seem like the Empire now knows about, I suppose, what this ship looks like. So I guess Luthen is either going to have to heavily modify the ship or get a new ship. But he has managed to get away. Now, how much has he given away with this? It's kind of unclear, but it will be interesting to see how they kind of pick up on this and what actually kind of happens coming off of this. The Mon Mothma stuff in the episode was interesting because you obviously have Vel involved here, and you have some scenes with her trying to kind of figure out what's going on also. Because again, like there was a Cinta scene as well that, again, something's going to happen there. It seems that the Empire also have some guy watching out. So there's stuff on Ferrix that's going down quite heavily. But anyway, the Mon Mothma stuff here is that we find out that her daughter is actually heavily into a lot of the customs of their people that Mon Mothma herself seems to have kind of viewed as being, they should probably be forgotten in the past and moved away from. And her daughter seems to have gone into them like into a crazy degree. It feels like borderline cultish, but like it's talked about like she was the one who found the elder. It's not the father kind of encouraging this at all. Mon Mothma revealed, so it's purely her daughter acting on her own. And the takeaway from this probably has to be that I guess that means her daughter is all for an arranged marriage. Because if she believes in these beliefs and stuff like that, why wouldn't she believe in that one too? And that's why they bring up you're not taking marriage proposals, and she basically has got one already. And it's one that she needs to do to secure the money, because they do finally in this episode with the Mon and Vel scene kind of explain the kind of backstory on what's actually happened here. This is something like I was wanting them to maybe explain in one of the earlier episodes where this got brought up, of like, okay, what was she doing with the money beforehand, and what happened that is causing this to happen. So I appreciated the more detailed scene here explaining that it was actually easy a while back to take out like 100,000 credits, no one asked any questions. But with the Empire beginning to clamp down, suddenly I can't do that. Suddenly there's an investigation coming and I need this money as soon as possible. So it seems like she's sort of almost resigned herself to the fact that she has to agree to this proposal meeting effectively between the banker guy's son and her daughter. And it's almost worse for Mon knowing that her daughter's probably going to be completely like all for it, because it is part of the traditions of where they're from. Now, maybe this is maybe a step too far. Maybe Mon actually addressing her daughter and saying that, hey, there's a proposal basically coming in for you. Maybe that will have the daughter freak out a little bit, because otherwise she seems relatively rebellious. So who knows if it's just like she happens to have taken an interest in this stuff, or is she just doing this to kind of go against her mother, but that actually something that's going to more heavily affect her life going forward might actually be a step too far. That's going to be sort of like the interesting thing for her, of like what actually happens in all of this. Vel, like are they doing anything with the fact that like Vel was there while this happened, and like Vel kind of realizing that like maybe I can get the money and kind of prevent this from happening? Who knows what exactly they're doing there, but they're building up to some sort of a big decision happening here, and it's somewhat interesting. It's definitely not the direction I expected the Mon Mothma side of the series to go in, but it's interesting enough for sure. What else do we have here? The Andor stuff and Melchi. So they hide in the wall while some kind of ships searching for them go by. They then spot a ship that they can potentially escape on, and two kind of aliens out doing some hunting or something like that. They make a break for it, but the hunters have set traps to guard their ship, which is quite clever. And you think this is going to go one way, but it goes like the complete opposite direction. They have a conversation with them and are eventually able to get to the idea that these guys don't like the Empire either. And so it's not just they let them free, but it's like, we'll also bring you somewhere. So they're revealed to just be actually like very nice people wanting to help people who are opposing the Empire. And it's just a complete kind of change up from what you maybe expected. No weird escape scene or anything like that. No, they get brought to where they need to go. And so they go back to the planet that Andor originally got arrested on. He goes into where he was staying, gets the money. It's all there. So he has his like the two guns. He gives one of them to Melchi. He has his money. He also has the Nemik's explanation of the rebellion and stuff like that. The wording there is probably off, but the Nemik's writings that he was given, he still has them as the sort of foundation for the rebellion. So they, it seems like, go their separate ways once Andor finds out about what happened to his mother. Melchi's the one to actually propose that they split up, and it seems like Andor probably realizes he will need to go back there to figure out what happened and for the funeral, basically. So that seems to be the major setup here, is just that everyone is converging on Ferrix, which seems to be I get the feeling that they're revealing that there has been a sort of longer running undercurrent of rebellion in this place than we've seen before. Like, the episode being called, like, the Daughters of Ferrix, as well as them, in my mind, I think referencing that for one of the first times, I think. Did they mention it in one of the earlier episodes? I think they might have. But that all being kind of, like, present here makes it feel like, oh, yeah, okay, something's going down here. That this is going to be, you know, we saw what happened in the earlier episodes in the kind of battle here. Something much bigger, it feels like, is going to happen at this funeral. And it's an exciting build to see how it all goes down. Because Andor is going to realize he has to stay out of things. They know that, like, the Empire is kind of allowing them to do this. They have a permit to do this. But they're on the alert for kind of anyone suspicious at all. And then you have little bits and pieces like, you know, where exactly is Luthen doing? Is his story completely disconnected from everything else? Or is he going to end up on Ferrix as well? Cyril Karn. It kind of feels like that's probably the setup, is that, like, Andor will evade the Empire, but, like, Cyril will maybe find Andor first and we'll get something happening there. You know, the setup, I think, is actually quite good here. And in that sense, like, I don't really have too many complaints about this episode, because it felt kind of good in a way that the finale only has one episode of build, rather than the show feeling like it's been locked quite heavily into every arc needs 2 full episodes of build. Then big stuff can happen. So I actually appreciated us getting an episode that had a bit of an action set piece and did most of its setup work here. So we'll see what they do in the final episode. Obviously, we know there's a season 2 coming. In terms of how much resolution we get to the plots that were set up in season 1, and how much is more of a setup for the secondary season. Obviously, I guess there'll be some reveals about Ferrix and the rebellion, which will probably lead to Andor solidifying his need to become part of the rebellion. How exactly they have the characters maneuver around and Andor get in touch with the right people, that's maybe going to be a little bit more kind of tricky to kind of particularly predict. But it feels like that is the direction they probably have to go in. Maybe Luthen's identity will become out in the open, so we'll see him maybe becoming a little bit more desperate. Otherwise, you know, pretty good. There was one mention about, like, oh, in terms of, like, how many of us do you think survived, is what Andor and Melchior are talking about. And they just mentioned sort of like, not enough. So they're saying others survived. It's not just the 2 of them, even though they kind of, I think, proposed the idea at one point. What if it is just the 2 of us? So maybe they're setting up that, you know, the leader guy from the previous episodes will make a return, but who knows? Who knows? So yeah, nothing too much to say about this episode, because I do think in the end, like, a lot of the sort of, like, discussion around this show is more about, you know, the quality of this show. They should take this and use it on other Star Wars shows. But again, just that I don't think this is the perfect Star Wars show. It is good. It is different. I'm glad it exists. But there's a balance to be had here. I don't think every piece of Star Wars needs to be like this. I think this show itself could do with kind of leaning a little bit away from the kind of heavy directions that they went in terms of, like, you know, there's been a lot of talk officially from, like, showrunners and stuff like that of basically them being like, we purposely wanted to make it not feel as much like Star Wars and stuff like that, which is a bit of a weird thing to see. And it's just like, you know, have confidence in the series you're dealing with. You don't need to get rid of everything that comes across as Star Wars just to get your show across seriously. Because again, the scene with the aliens actually worked. So maybe they'll be a little bit more confident going forward with utilizing aliens in more scenes going forward. It has been very human-centric. And given that the whole basic intent of, like, the rebellion is that we basically get the idea that the Empire is pretty much all humans. And and then the rebellion is a crazy like mix of a bunch of different kind of humans. I'd like to see some of that stuff come into play, like maybe we get some Mon Calamari characters and stuff like that included, but we have to wait and see. So they're my thoughts overall on episode 11. I am somewhat excited for the finale. Not as much as maybe other shows' finales, and that's just, I think, a factor of the type of show that this is. It's more intrigue. I want to see what direction they go in, and hopefully we are pleasantly surprised with like some kind of striking, shocking kind of changes of like direction and approach, but we'll see how it goes. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. Otherwise, that's been it. Thanks for watching, and bye.